So I got a request to speak about Pesach cleaning, and I think if I understood the request correctly, it was like, how do we not look negatively at it, or how do we handle it in a positive way, or something. That's the way at least I understood it. It could be I misunderstood, but that's the way I understood the question. And I want to give you a true answer to that question. The men had a little bit of an argument downstairs if the women love Pesach or not. But the majority of the men said that the women do love Pesach, despite the difficult oil that they have to carry. I don't think anybody would say they want to skip it. I don't think anyone, chas v'shalom, would want to skip it. And I just want to say this. This is what I'm going to say is true. You know, sometimes you have to say things that are true, whether they're popular or not. And so I'm going to say it because it's true, okay? The truth is, it's a chiddush that we could get away with working so little. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that Pesach is such an enormous present from Hashem. It is such a zchus. It is just such a fantastic opportunity that the fact that with this little bit of investment, a couple of 100 hours of investment, we get to be connected to that yontif of Pesach. It's a small price to pay. We should have to give thousands of dollars and hours of backbreaking work to get a day of Pesach. And we get 8 days of Pesach. 8 days of being connected to our Messiah. You know how many years ago we came out of Mitzrayim? Sorry, how many years ago? What? Well, what year did we come out of Mitzrayim? What? 2448. 2448. What year is it this year? 5778. We came out of Mitzrayim, if you want to me to do the math for you, 3,330 years ago. So even number. You double checking? No. Trust me. Oh, did Suri agree with me? And we talked about this, I remember if it was last year or the year before, by On Shabbos HaGadol, the concept that when we sit down to the Seder, we're holding on to a chain that our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmothers held on to. And when that chain goes through, you remember the chain you heard us? That chain goes through generations and countries and concentration camps and crusades, palaces and forests, holes and towers. We've been everywhere and in every situation, from fabulously wealthy to incredibly poor, from fabulously powerful to incredibly persecuted, and in everything, generation after generation, country after country, that chain continues. And we sit by the Pesach Seder, and we drink our 4 kaises, we eat our kazayas of matzah, and we're tugging on a chain that our mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, great-great-grandmothers, great-great was 3,330 years of Jewish mothers connected to Har Sinai have participated in. That is incredible that we could do that. And the power that's unleashed, which I'll get to as my next point, the power that's unleashed on this yantif, in our neshamas, the abilities that we have, the kaiches that we are given because of our Pesachs, is unbelievable. How do you think we've survived? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. 3,330 years, and we're still doing everything exactly the way it says in the Torah. It's unbelievable. I always take such pride when I go speak for the police department. So they're new cadets. They call me in for sensitivity training. So they have, it's not just me, they have representatives of every religion there. I don't meet them, different times, but they have the all the cadets there, and they're interested, and it's very important because we have we have a small community, and they will be called to the community, and there will be situations where they have to interact with the community, and we have to teach them about the community. And I always wonder how much they really remember when they finally graduate and they're on the street and they get called to a Jewish house on a Shabbos for something. Like, how much do they really remember that there was a rabbi that spoke to them? I don't know, but I just love the opportunity, and I say the same Hakdama each time. I love the opportunity of sharing with them that we have not changed a bit in 3,330 years. Of course, sometimes I say 29 years or 27 years or 25 years, depending on how many years ago I gave the class. But we haven't changed. I like to use my father as a mashal because we're interesting in the sense that we're not like the Amish that have not embraced the modern world. But we are very, very ancient. Anybody who watches us eat a Pesach Seder, we are eating the same matzah in an oven, no technology, no nothing. The same as, like from 3,300 years ago, basically. Maybe it was softer. It's possible. So I'm sorry? Yeah, but the matzah is still the matzah. There's still that Zaidi there who's saying that Kiddush that he heard from his Zaidi. I think even in the hotels, I know it's. I could get onto the whole ranting about hotels bandwagon. Every Rav likes to rant about hotels until he's invited to speak at one. So I'm not going to do that. But I wasn't invited to, you know what I mean? Suddenly it's like, no, I think it's not so bad. I think it's a shame Shamayim, they're getting together, But anyway, but I think that you'll find even Adarabah, that's a good mashal. The mashal that I use always is my father, because my father is a computer programmer. And you know that when you're in computers, you have to know, I don't know if there's anyone here in computers, but you have to stay updated. You can't just, Mrs. Nugea would know this, you can't just be samech on what was going on 5 years ago or 10 years ago. You have to know what's going on now. So my father's involved in computer systems. He's the latest and the newest and the latest and the newest. I remember his first computer, which they had to build. He programmed. He did his first yesodos of his programming at home many years ago when I was about 10, and they had to build a room in the basement for the computer. Okay, then it was connected through wires to upstairs to a terminal, but the computer was like, they had to build a room in the basement for it. Okay, now that computer is smaller. That computer that filled the room was much, 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 much smaller than your not smartphones. I'm not even talking about the smartphones. Okay? So you're talking about really the modern age. Now, my father is also a cipher. So I love describing how he spends the whole day with these 21st century computers, and then he comes home, and he sits down by a desk, and he pulls out ink that's made from only natural products, and he takes out a piece of parchment, and he starts to scratch out the letters that are 3,300 years old on a parchment. Gone is the computer and the technology and everything, and that's the same person. It's not a steer, right? That's how we live. That is our lives. And that's something magical about it. How are we still here? How are we still doing this? Do you know that many Goyim and even secular Jews, they don't really believe that we do it? They can't really believe that we do it. If you know people, you know that that's true. There's a certain sometimes skepticism. Yeah. But if the phone rings, obviously you're going to pick it up. You're not going to just let it ring. Things like that. There's a certain skepticism that we really actually do this, and that we stick to it hard. We don't make Pesach come out on the weekend because it's easier for us, and we don't do the Seder early because we need to put the kids to sleep. And we do it like tough, the way it was supposed to be. We stick to it. The magic, the nace, the miracle that we are still doing this, that's the power of Pesach. So those of you that walked in middle, I was middle of saying something extremely obnoxious. And what I was saying was that the fact that we have to work so hard to make Pesach is nothing compared to what we're getting in a Pesach. And all of the work that we're doing is nothing. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing compared to the matana. We have that in our lives sometimes. As much as it's difficult and it's stressful and it's sometimes painful to have to put all that energy and effort into making a yantif, what we get is like winning the jackpot. It's so incredible. Which brings me to my next point. I learned a very interesting halacha this week. This week I learned, and I told my chavrusa then that it was like, it struck me. I said, as we were learning it, I said, this is delicious. And I've been thinking about it. So we're supposed to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim when we daven every day. That's why we say, L'man Tizka, we say, Ani Hashem Nechsher Tzeisi Escha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, in Shema. We mention Yitzias Mitzrayim every day. We mention Yitzias Mitzrayim every night. And by the Seder, we spend half the night talking about Yitzias Mitzrayim. Let me ask you this question. What if instead of mentioning coming out of Mitzrayim, I mention crossing the Yam Suf? We also crossed the Yam Suf, right? So can I do that instead of mentioning Yitzias Mitzrayim? It is the culmination of Yitzias Mitzrayim, isn't it? Isn't the final Makkah B'Patish, the final Yitzias Mitzrayim, isn't that Kriyas Yam Suf? What? Yeah, but getting the Torah is the next stage. The Talmud Yerushalmi calls Kriyas Yam Suf Gemar Geulasam, the end of the Geula. And maybe it's not getting the Torah, maybe it's the Mishkan. Maybe it's not the Mishkan, maybe it's going into Eretz Yisrael. We can follow that train. But in terms of getting out of Mitzrayim, getting out of the grip of Mitzrayim, isn't crossing the Yam Suf, which is what we celebrate on Shvi Shel Pesach, isn't that the final stage of the Geula? So can I mention that instead of Yitzias Mitzrayim, which made me wonder if the night of the Seder, when I tell my kids the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim, can I just say, we started the Makkos a few times, I think, right? My kids laugh. Like, I don't know if we ever got halfway through the Makkos, by the time the Seder is over. Maybe this year I want to do Kriyas Yam Suf. I'm going to tell the story of Kriyas Yam Suf. Right? Maybe we could do that. Right? I think the heaven riches decorate half their house like the Yam Suf. What? Right? When they go out of Mitzrayim, they go through the Yam Suf also. And we do talk about the Yam Suf by the night of the Seder. So, can I do that? Can I start with the story of Kriyas Yam Suf? So it's a big machlokes. Some people say you can, because it's the final stage of the Geula. And some say no. You cannot use Kriyas Yam Suf as Yitzias Mitzrayim. Yitzias Mitzrayim is Yitzias Mitzrayim. And my question to you is why? Why is that? Why can't I use Kriyas Yam Suf? That's even more incredible. Yeah, but I don't have to mention every part of the process. I have to mention that we came out of Mitzrayim. Right? It doesn't say anywhere that you have to mention the Makkos, you have to mention certain things. You have to mention that you came out of Mitzrayim. And okay, so I'm thinking along those lines. I think this point is a very big point. I think so. I'm thinking now. This is fresh. I just learned this halacha yesterday, and I've been thinking about this over the last 2 days. But I think that what you're saying, I think there's tremendous truth to it. That there's a significant difference between coming out of Mitzrayim and crossing the Yam Suf, even though they're both incredible and they're both important and they're both part of our Seder and part of our Pesach, but there's two parts. One is that we can get out. The other is that we cannot get sucked back in. Isn't that the two part? Right? That's what you're saying. The first step of Yitzias Mitzrayim is that we can get out. It's in the history of Mitzrayim, a slave never escaped. Right, you know that. There was, with Kishuf and everything, they had such security. A slave never managed to escape. Getting out of Mitzrayim is a very significant thing. We can get out. And Kriyas Yam Suf is that we can get not schlepped back in, which is also important. But I think we're missing part of the story if we don't say that we can get out of Mitzrayim, because that's a very, very important nekuda. That's a good point. It's similar to tshuva in the sense that tshuva would be like Yetzias Mitzrayim. I have to get out of the Aveira, and Kriyas Yamsuf would be like Kabbalah al Ha'asid. I have to not get schlepped back into the Aveira. That's a good point. And I was thinking that is very relevant to us, because when we talk about the power of Pesach, we know that Pesach does pack quite a punch in terms of a person's ability to extricate themselves from their Mitzrayims, from the things that limit them. And I think that we all have our things that are limiting for us and are difficult for us, and our midas that we're trying to work on, or our situations that we're davening for a Yeshua from. And Yetzias Mitzrayim is our mashal, but it's not just a mashal. It's our engine, it's our power of being able to get out of the darkness, of being able to get out of being constricted and held down and limited and held back. And Yetzias Mitzrayim is the power that a Yid has to escape from what's holding him down. Kriyas Yamsuf is the power that a Yid has not to get pulled back in. That's also an important power. But I think we're missing part of the story if we don't realize that a Yid also has the power to get out of Mitzrayim. And I think that it's important that we focus on the night of the Seder. The Seder happens at night, not during the day. They left Mitzrayim during the day. Right? Why do we do the Seder at night? Wouldn't it be nice if we did it during the day? Some of our kids, it took till a certain age till they found out that we do it at night. Because we did the Manishtana by the Suda by day also, when they were very young. But wouldn't that be nice if we did the Seder, like the first day Yantif in the morning? Would that be something? Why do we do it at night?
Preparation at night, and the final play was at night.
Yeah. Right, but that means that we left by day.
You said we're not listening to you say to we're listening to Hashem.
So the truth is that the Gemara says that we came out of Mitzrayim twice. That in a certain sense, on a certain level, we came out of Mitzrayim, at night. Because of what you're saying, Paroi freed us. We were not slaves anymore at night. And then we actually left in the morning. But we celebrate the night part. You know why? Because the night tells us that even though it's nighttime, which is usually a time of darkness, do you know that in Mitzrayim that night it turned daytime? Chazal say that it became a bit like daylight. Laila kayoim ta'ir. The night became like the day. What? The Chazal talk about it, but there are two stages. I'm speaking about that stage of it. But that night of Yetzias Mitzrayim tells me that even though it's the time of darkness, and even though it's a time, night always represents, we always daven that people should come out me'afela la'oira, from the darkness to the light, right? Darkness always represents tzara. We sit by the Seder at night, look outside and see that it's dark outside, and we're making believe it's light. The Ur has come. Me'afela, we say by the Seder, we daven that we should be zeicha to come out me'afela la'ur gadol, from the darkness to a great light. And that demands that a Yid use a power that he has, that every Yid has, every man and woman has, and that is the power to not give up. That is the power not to be miyayish. In fact, one of the most famous Divrei Torah from Reb Tzadok it's about Sukkot actually, but it's about giving up. The Gemara says that a woman came to Rav Nachman to complain that the Rish Galusa, who was the leader, he was like the administrator of the Yidden in Bavel, and his people were sitting in a sukkah that was made out of wood that they stole from her. So she came to the Rav Nachman and she said, Rish Galusa, v'kulhu, all the people of the Rish Galusa, b'sukkah gezula havuyasvi, they are sitting in a stolen sukkah. And Rav Nachman said to his Talmidim, she stopped screaming, don't pay attention to her. So she said, don't pay attention to me. A woman whose father has 318 slaves and you're not going to pay attention to me? You know who that father is? What? Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu had 318 slaves. Right? So she was saying, a woman whose father is Avram Avinu, I am a princess. Yeah, I am not just anybody you just say she's screaming. I'm important. Don't ignore me. That's what the Gemara says. Interesting Gemara. But Reb Tzadok says there was something going on beneath the surface. He says the reason Rav Nachman didn't want to pay attention to her is because there's such a thing in when something is taken from someone that if they give up hope on getting it back, so of course they're owed the money for it, but the actual product does not have to be given back to them. This is a very complicated halacha. My point is not to get into that halacha and when it applies. But there's something called the yiyush, which is to give up, is kaina, that the person, if someone steals something, so he has to pay back money, but he doesn't have to give back the actual thing. Sometimes that applies and sometimes it doesn't. And in yeshiva we've spent months and months learning about this. So we're not gonna do that tonight. But there's a concept that Rav Nachman was saying, don't pay attention to it. She was miyaya, she gave up. And if she gave up, then we're not paying attention. So she said, a woman whose father had 318 slaves, and you think I gave up? What does that mean? What's the gematria of Yiyosh? Yud is 10, and Aleph is 1, is 11, and Vav is 6, so that's 17. That's 17, right? And then Shin is 300, is 317. So the gematria of Yiyosh is 317. She's like, I am not a Yiyosh person. I am the daughter of Avram Avinu who had 318 slaves. We are not miyayish, us Yidden. Jews are not miyayish. We're more than Yiyosh. We're past Yiyosh. We're beyond Yiyosh. My father had 318 slaves, which was her way of saying, we don't have Yiyosh. Klal Yisrael has the ability not to give up. And that's a midah that Klal Yisrael has that we got from Avram Avinu, that we do not give up. And this is a good time to think about it, that it's a few days before Yantif. I know it doesn't make sense that it's snowing now, but it is Pesach time. And it's a time for us to think about the prisons that we find ourselves in. And they could be anywhere, and everybody knows in their heart with what their prisons are. And many people don't know what's in someone else's heart. It's not important. But everybody knows what their prisons are. It could be emotional, it could be a ruchniistic struggle, it could be a practical thing, or a physical thing, or a financial thing, or a shalom thing, or a chinuch thing. Everybody has their own mitzarims, their own prisons. And Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim is a time that we remember that we have the power to escape even prisons that no one's ever escaped before. No one ever escaped Mitzrayim. And we have the ability to come out of those Meitzarim, those Min HaMeitzar Karasi Ka. We have the ability to come out of those Mitzrayims, and we do not give up. I think that there's some people that wonder. You see, I'm honored that Yehudis is here tonight, so I'm going to read her mind for you, because I know how to do that. And when Yehudis hears a shmooze like this, she, correct me if I'm wrong, she thinks to herself, based on what you're saying, there should be like massive miracles taking place all over the place every Pesach. What's going on? Yes? Yes. So because, and right, you speak about it's time for Yetzias Mitzrayim, and don't give up, and you can get out of anything, and the power of Pesach, you expect that you're not going to walk into Pesach, and boom, people are just going to be just like liberated all over the place. And Yehudis, who's a realist, we can call her, she will ask me, well, that's a very nice speech, thank you very much, but I didn't notice that last Pesach. Fair question? There's a few answers to that question. Some of it is that you don't notice, because you don't know what people are carrying, and you don't know the inner workings. But there's another answer, and it's a little bit of a more difficult answer, and that is we lock ourselves up by not believing that we can be free. We lock ourselves up because we lose the faith that we can be free, because we were 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19 and 20, and at a certain point, it's just like throw in the towel. You emotionally throw in the towel. And we lose the emunah that we can be free, and that's an important part of our freedom, is to believe that we can be, is to try to become free.
I'm just talking about the emotional part. You can't heal yourself. Like, you can't cause a yeshua to happen, but you could handle it better. It's just how you respond.
That's all part of it, but and I agree with that.
Some things are not our choice.
Like, what's practical about, like, how do you do that on Pesach? You have a Seder and you have Yontif, and when are you tapping into the power?
Okay, first of all, the entire time you're tapping into the power. Just by... Yeah, first I want to tell you something. That's a good question, and it's a very good point. Yes, this is it. And by the way, you're not going to feel yourself floating. You're not going to have a halo on your head. You're not going to. Your children are not going to come to Yeshiva Katan and say, "I promise my mother was floating out of the chair by the Seder." That is not going to happen. Rather, what is going to happen is that you're going to feel bloated and have a stomach ache and be slightly drunk, and the end of the Seder, the blur is going to happen, and you're going to have this cynical thought at the end of the Seder, wow, it's amazing. We came out of the Yam Suf, we came out of Mitzrayim, we crossed the Yam Suf and everything, and I still have a house to clean up. And you're going to feel that way, and 100% that's what you're going to feel. But the koyach in the Yid is there, and if you want to know what to do about it, it starts now, and it's during the times that we have some time to think, and sometimes even while we're busy, we have time to think, and it's by thinking even. Is there a midah in me, or an action, or an anxiety, or a tzara, or a difficulty that I just haven't attacked, either in tefillah, or by just trusting Hashem, or being more besimcha about it, or by trying again for the 1500th time? And how am I trying that again? And to just try to pull together the energy to try again. You're not going to see the correlation between the energy that our neshama gets and that koyach. Because that happens min hashamayim, and we just feel like at the end of the Seder, like, someone please carry me upstairs. That's what we feel. But our neshamas are liberated. And we have to have a faith in that koyach to give it a chance. Yosef HaTzadik went to sleep at night, and the Malach taught him 70 languages the night before he went to Parai. The Malach taught him 70 languages. He woke up in the morning. You think about this. You think that did he realize it? That he knew 70 languages? He may not even have realized. He may not have realized. How many languages do you know? Okay, so is there anybody here that knows multiple languages? What? Okay, so let's say somebody knows a few languages, okay? There are people that know a number of languages. My father speaks Hebrew and Yiddish and English and Hungarian and German and French and Spanish, let's say. Not fluently, but he's familiar with let's say 7 languages, okay? Do you think he wakes up in the morning, he's like, yeah, my French is still good, my Spanish? No, he's not thinking about it. He's thinking in English. But if I would say, how do you say this in French? Then his mind would go to French, and he would tell me how to say it in French. Is that accurate? Okay. Yosef HaTzadik wakes up in the morning, he's thinking in Lashon Kodesh or Egyptian or whatever language he's thinking. You think he thinks to himself, oh, Chinese, look at that. You think that happened? I don't think so. I think he was standing in front of Paroi, and he had to declare his languages. And I think that if he wouldn't have opened himself up to the possibility that he could know more than he thought he knew, he may have not really been like, no, I'm sorry, no, not for me. Have you ever been asked to do something that you thought you can't do, and someone pushed you because they believed in you, and they believed that you can do it, and then when you were done, you're like, hey, I could do it. Have you ever pushed your children that way? Has your daughter ever gotten a part in a play and said, no, I'm not getting up on that stage? You have a bar mitzvah bacher, who's terrified to get up there to speak, and you tell him, I am sure that you could do it. Whether you're sure or not is another thing. But you tell him, I am sure that you could do it, and then he gets up and then he didn't know he could do it. So that's where it comes. You want to know what to do practically on Pesach? We try again. And we notice and appreciate the progress that we make. And we daven again. And we hit the challenge again. That's what we do. That's what we do practically. While we're being Mekayim the mitzvahs and falling asleep and dealing with the matzah and cleaning up the house and chasing after the kids and figuring out what we're going to give them to wear when they stained all their clothes already on the first day of Yontif. While we're doing all that, but we're trying again. One more thing. I have a few minutes left. One more thing. And, I have this thing, and many of you know that before Pesach I like to speak a little bit about the fact that we all love our families like crazy. But on Pesach we get to spend a lot of time with our families. Some of us are having company for Pesach, and some of us are going to family for Pesach. Not all of us, but many of us. And we get to spend a lot of time with our families. And, when you're not with your family, you have one memory of them, but then when you walk back into your mother-in-law's house, you're like, oh, right. You have a different memory of them. And again, I'm not trying to be cynical, even though I am a little cynical, because you're a little cynical, because we all have our challenges to deal with our families. But I do mean earnestly and ehrlich, I do mean that we do love our families and we are loyal to our families, and there is nothing like family. That's also true. I wanted to bring up something. As Mrs. Meyerfeld could tell you, we had an unbelievable experience today that the high school girls decided on their own to organize a share and a birthday party, I'm told, but to organize a share, and they asked me to speak. And I'm always so excited when teenagers decide on their own. They weren't told, they weren't advised, they weren't none of the. Okay, maybe I gave them the idea, but they didn't. But they really ran with it. They did. They ran. I got a phone call. Could you please come? They ran with it completely. They could have easily ignored me. They do know how to ignore. They do have that knowledge. But so I spoke to them today. But one of the topics that we talked about is relevant for this also, because I was mentioning to them at Dvar Torah about the Haggadah that I think I may have gone through here last year. I think that's why it was in my head. So I'm not going to go through it by Arichas, and it's also late, and we have to get back to making Yantif. But the concept was that when the person is bringing Bikurim in Parshas Kisavai, which is the basis for the Haggadah, we say a story. We say we came out of Mitzrayim. We went down to Mitzrayim, and the Mitzrayim were very mean to us. And then we say, and then we daven to Hashem. Vanitzak el Hashem elekei avosenu. And then we daven to Hashem. But we didn't. If you look in Parshas Shemos, you'll see that we did not daven to Hashem. We screamed because we were in pain. There's a big difference between those things. Vatal shavasam elo eleikim min ha'avoda, and their cries went up to Hashem from the hard work. They were not directing their cries to Hashem. There were many Yidden that didn't know about Hashem. And by our Seder, I love going through, one of the parts of the Seder that I love going through is like the kids. We always do a story of the kids in Mitzrayim, like hearing this rumor that there's something called Hashem, and asking their parents, did you ever hear of this Hashem thing? What is it, a person? Is it a place? What is it? What's this Hashem thing? Moshe Rabbeinu showed up, this man showed up, a big tzaddik, and he's talking about something called Hashem. I never heard of it. That's how little they knew. Many of them didn't know what Hashem was. They didn't daven to Hashem. But yet we report, and we cried out to Hashem. So what I said over today was that when Yidden cry, they are crying to Hashem. We don't have to realize it. But when a Yid cries, he's crying to Hashem. And when a Yid calls out, he's calling out to Hashem. And sometimes we don't have kavanah, and sometimes we're in too much pain to daven at all, and sometimes we're just frustrated, and sometimes we cry for reasons that we think are silly or not important. But when a Yid is crying, Hashem is listening, because a Yid is wired to Hashem. A Yid is attached to Hashem, and the cry is to Hashem. When a baby cries, the baby's not crying to his mother, but he really is. And the mother hears it as if the baby's in the next room, and the baby starts crying, and the mother hears it as if the baby's saying, "Ma, hello, are you coming to get me?" That's how we hear it.
Why does the father not hear?
What?
Why does the father not hear?
I don't understand the question. I'm talking about during the day when.
Cries the baby, the mother's going to get
I'm talking about during the day. The father didn't hear because he was up all night with the baby. Anyway, so we schmoozed about this, and this is it's an inspiring topic and something to think about. But just to take our last 3-4 minutes, one of the ways to go with this is that we also have to be like Hashem, which means that sometimes when people carry on, we have to be able to connect with why they're really carrying on. And it's true with our children, it's true with our siblings, it's true with our parents and our in-laws. A lot of times people say things to us that are offensive. And I've had the schus to try to be mechazik people before and after Yantif many times, either bracing themselves or doing damage control afterwards for the interaction sometimes that people have when they spend a lot of time with their families. Again, we love our families, but sometimes there are things that are deep and long term, and there are issues that are there, and one of the things that a person needs to do to be able to survive a yontif, appreciating their family, is to think deeper than the surface. When people make comments that don't make sense, that are hurtful or not, or judgmental or critical, read deeper. And you will find a person who themselves is insecure or nervous or worried or scared or intimidated. The relative that's the most critical, believe it or not, is not your relative that is the most confident. Because the most confident relative does not have to criticize. Your relative that is the most critical is the most scared. And when you show up to your parents or your in-laws or whatever it is, and there's a tug-of-war, an emotional tug-of-war going on, and you could feel the different pieces in the room, you could feel there's a lot more going on than the surface. When we scream, Hashem listens to beneath the surface. When we daven without kavana, Hashem listens to the kavana that's underneath it. And it's our job to do that also. And that's my chizuk before Yantif. Mirz Hashem will still get together for Shabbos Agadol. And I'm going to talk a little bit about chinuch on Shabbos Agadol. But chinuch is a Pesach subject. But for now, just planning to go away for Yantif and to deal with the challenges of a Pesach, of spending time, whether it's just for a day of Chol Hamoed or if it's for 8 days, however long you're going to be away or interacting, think deeply. Think deeply. The mother or the mother-in-law, the father or the father-in-law, the one that's detached, the one that's critical, the one that's has hakpadas that you feel like are not reasonable or that your husband thinks are not reasonable. There's something behind it. And very often, if you think about it in that way, you'll find just the most difficult people are usually the most hurting people. And when we think about it that way, it gives us the kayach to be able to deal with it. We have Kanai Nahara, we have a lot of company by us, and it's something that we, over years and years of having company, that we've noticed and we've watched people grow, Baruch Hashem. Not everyone comes the same way. People grow and they develop and they become closer over time. But people that the company that's less helpful and more judgmental and more critical is the one that's less confident and more scared and has more going on in their own lives. And the ones that just jump in and they just complimentary and they're just optimistic and they're in a good mood, those are the ones that are confident and happy and things are going well in their lives. So let's try to do that. We're going back again. We're going to just have the same resentments again and the same frustrations again. We've done it enough times, right? We've done it enough times. You ever feel while you're driving to New York or Passaic or Lakewood or flying somewhere, do you ever feel like you could just take out a notebook, you could write the script you're ready now? What do you have to go for? You can write the script now. You're going to get there, and this one's going to do this, and this one's going to say this, and then this one's going to do this. Then this one's going to get up in a huff and leave, and then this one's going to go and calm them down. Right? It could be I am damaged, that this doesn't happen in any other families. okay? But just on the chance, maybe, I've heard rumors that in other communities, whatever, okay? But with this, if we could write the script, that means that we could think deeply and we could notice and be sensitive to the challenges that other people have. We have challenges that make us sometimes react strongly, and it has to do with our vulnerabilities and our challenges, and it's kedai for us to recognize that also, that sometimes we fly off the handle about something ourselves because we were sensitive and we were insecure or we were overwhelmed or we were hurt about something. It's kedai for us to realize it about ourselves, and it's kedai for us to realize it about our relatives, our close relatives, our more distant relatives, and in that way we'll be doing just what Hashem does. And in the schus that we take it upon ourselves to try to give the benefit of the doubt in an intelligent way, to see deeper than the surface, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us the benefit of the doubt and see beyond the surface, that we know that the truth is that all of us have only one tefillah that we go into Pesach with, and that's Va'ani Kirvas Elokim Li Tov, that closeness to Hashem is what we desire, that we want to be close to Hashem, and we should be Zeicha that, with all due respect to Yehudis, that by next Pesach we should just be talking about the Yeshuas that just exploded from Klal Yisrael after this Yantif from Yetz Hashem. Yashakayach.